everyone, welcome to the Ability Show. My name is Crystal Sige, and I hope that you were able to catch our first episode that aired last week, which was our debut. Very excited, and that you were able to learn a little bit more about the issues and the reason why we have put together the Ability Show in general. Last week we opened by talking about the issues surrounding ability or disability in the country. We had 3 visitors come and join us on the show. They are from the visually impaired community, and the 3 gentlemen helped us to understand through their eyes what they feel are the issues in the country, the challenges, and what people are doing to counter those challenges so far, as well as some of their own experiences in the country to do with accessibility surrounding buildings and streets. It was really interesting, and I hope that you were able to see that and give your opinions to us, please, on ability@openinstitute.com at any time, as well as comments and suggestions for further episodes. But today we move on to the next topic, which I'd like to talk about. This is mindset. So the issue I feel is that we as a society are still in a mindset that is generally a little bit negative. Our attitudes are a little bit negative towards people with disabilities. This is not across the board, of course, I'm just generalizing, but it seems to me that there are many people in society that haven't quite accepted persons with disability fully in society. I feel as though it's partly our fault because some of us in the disabled community are a little bit shy. We don't want to come out of our silos, of our spaces, because we feel unsafe. We feel that we might be judged. We feel that we might be condemned or teased, so on and so forth. But for the most part, the issue feels like it lies in society, their attitudes, the stereotypes, the things that come from myths from before we were even here on this earth. To share and to talk about our issues with disability. One thing I feel for sure is that when we are children, our parents, our uncles, our elders seem to plant seeds in our minds which are negative surrounding people with disabilities. You've heard these things before, I'm sure, like, don't go near that man, don't speak to that lady, don't touch that other kid if they have a disability. You know these things, I'm sure. These small little seeds that are planted in our minds when we are still children, when we're still quite vulnerable and we believe all that we hear. I think it starts there. And us as an African culture, we have a lot in this particular area. We do this a lot, and we have done this a lot. And I feel like we still continue to do the same thing. So that's the issue that we're going to talk about today, the mindset surrounding disability, and how that is really foundational to how we then perceive disability in future and in society in general. I feel like in the West, people have become a little bit more exposed with different people, different kind of conditions, and different kinds of ways of living, whether it be disability, sexuality, religion, beliefs, culture, so on and so forth. But in Africa, we still have a long way to go in these areas. And we want to talk about that today on The Ability Show. Today on the show, I had 3 more guests, but this time they were students from Kenyatta University here in Nairobi. These 3 students, Charles, Devian, and Medrine, have been working with us on the Ability program for a few months now, trying to understand and help us to assess buildings and streets to find out how accessible they are to every single person, but especially to people with disabilities. They are such amazing students, they're very bright, and they've learned so much whilst being with us on the program. So we had to invite them, of course, onto the Ability Show to find out from them firsthand what they have been experiencing throughout this whole process. The first question that I gave them is, what do you think is the society's mindset around disability? Where have we come from, and where do you think that we're going? In your experience in general, not to do with just people with disabilities, but in general, how accepting is the Kenyan society to people who are different in any way, shape, or form? And here's what they had to say.
What comes to mind when I hear ability is full and effective participation at an equal basis with others. So this means that being a person with a disability, regardless of the type of disability, the barriers that I face in the society, whether attitudinal or physical or societal, should be interrupted, because in real sense, that's what causes my disability. For instance, if I look at, let's say, the new banknotes, if I cannot interact with them well as a visually impaired person, that's what makes me a disabled person, not my disability, which is visual.
Persons with disability basically feel left out. We are more of second-class citizens when it comes to matters ability. We believe that the environment is not conducive enough for us to be able to lead the life.
We are not really mindful, maybe because we've not been sensitized. From the mapping experience, I got to realize that people are actually interested in making these places accessible for everyone. The thing is, they've not had that second voice of someone telling them the importance of having a wide door, the importance of having a pavement for pedestrians that is just set apart, the sounds in the elevators, tactile, a braille in the lift. We've just not had that second voice from someone to sensitize us about this issue. But generally, Kenyans are just open to help out.
Most Kenyans, they're like amazed when a person with disability does something little. They're like, oh, that is so inspiring. They want to give space. You want to move seats for them. I think that's what creates pressure. They don't treat them like they should just be freely. They should be involved in everything that we do like us. Most people are not educated about people with disabilities. You know, you just see them. It's like we fear them. So I would educate them and bring more information and just tell them that these people are just like us. They can do what we can do. There's no big difference between us and them.
That sounds really funny, but what Medrine has just said is completely true. I have experienced it firsthand, and I will tell you for a fact that many people with disabilities experience the same thing. This idea that we are so fragile, we have to be gentle, we have to be treated as if we have candy floss around us. This idea that people with disabilities can't be spoken to too loudly. They have to be seen as people who are eternal children almost. Like we have to be spoken to and treated with kiddie gloves all the time. I'm glad that she's been able to see this on her own without anyone having to tell her or show her or plant that seed in her mind. She's been able, through the ability program, as she said in her own words, she's been able to see this firsthand, and she wonders, why is that so? Why do people treat people with disabilities so differently? But of course, like the rest of them also said, they have also been a culprit to the same kinds of mindset in the past before coming and joining us in the ability program. In addition to this, there's something that Devian added to the end of her first question when I asked her about mindset in the country. And I'd like you to hear it from her firsthand because it's so true, and I feel it's such an important thing to highlight. Here she is.
Sometimes it may look like, it was a waste adding that extra space to put a ramp, because maybe there's 1 in 100 people who use that ramp, and therefore we want to overlook that it's important, because the 99 are okay, but the one person is suffering. So I just feel like until people are actually made to understand that even this one person needs to go to the library, needs to go to the washroom, that is when they realize, oh, actually, this thing is important.
I'm sure that you've heard of the saying that goes, Rome was not built in a day. This is the same for these 3 young students who have been helping us on the ability program at the Open Institute. They didn't come here with all this knowledge and with all this enlightenment surrounding ability and disability and the issues with accessibility in the country. Of course, since working with us, they've had a change in their mindset, and a positive one at that, I'm glad to say. You saw in the first episode of the Ability Show that we showed you what exactly we've been doing with the Ability program at the Open Institute. We had a training day where we invited volunteers to come and join us through registration and understand and go through a simulation to try and understand how it might feel to have a disability and live in Nairobi City. how difficult it is to go around, how difficult it is to just do the daily things that you and I always want to do with independence, of course, like go shopping, go to school, go to the office, so on and so forth. And of course, in this second episode, we want to give you a little bit more of what we did on that particular day with these students. After the volunteer training day, we went out mapping in several areas in Nairobi. These included the CBD, Westlands, several malls, churches, university campuses, South B, and many, many more. You can find all of these details on our website, of course, as always, on ability.or.ke or on our YouTube channel, which is Open Institute. But before you go there, let me give you a quick snap of what we did on the ground when out mapping in these areas that I've just mentioned. Here's a snippet of our first day of mapping. Morning, this is Crystal Asige. This is day one of our mapping exercise to see how accessible Nairobi streets and buildings are. So we are about to head over to the meeting point at Kencom, where all the volunteers are gathering up in the morning, and then from there we will go straight together to Westlands, and in Westlands we will separate ourselves into our pairs, go into the different zones that we're supposed to have according to our maps, and then start to map. So we've just left a group of volunteers in Westlands, and now we are heading over to Two Rivers Mall and as well to Garden City to see how accessible those two malls are. We're together with a couple of the volunteers in the car. We'll drop them off, and then we have to go back into Westlands to check on everyone else. After going back to Westlands, go to the office to start editing and to do any other troubleshooting that comes across during the day. So yeah, stick with us.
Unlike other malls in Kenya, I think it's the most equipped for the people who are able different. Now we just got to Garden City. We will tell you how it goes, so stay tuned.
We've come to the end of day one. It's been super long. Everyone's put in so much effort and work has been done really well so far. We have been able to map Westlands, two malls, which are Two Rivers and Garden City, and we've also been able to map government buildings in the CBD. So we're very happy for today. Everything has been done which was planned. The meeting point for all volunteers, everyone has come back together and they got debriefed and everything has happened. So we're just getting ready for tomorrow, basically. So a different area of Nairobi, but still exactly the same process will happen. We'll meet in the morning with all the volunteers, give them their brief, split up into our groups, into our zones, and then meet back in the afternoon when everyone is finished to debrief once again. So let's wait for tomorrow. It was so exciting as well as tiring and very, very challenging, to be quite honest, to get through the entire week, because that was just day one that we showed you. The rest of the videos for the rest of the days are on our platforms as mentioned. We then gave a task to university students to map their own campuses, the ones that we had not been able to map in our mapping week specifically. We called this the University Mapping Challenge. Through this challenge, we wanted students to map their own campuses because, of course, they know them best. They know all the corridors, they know all the side doors, they know all the buildings better than we could ever know. And so we wanted them to go and investigate their own campuses and see how accessible they are to students of all kinds of abilities. With the University Mapping Challenge, we of course had to make it a little bit competitive to keep everyone engaged and have them have a lot of fun, of course, in the process. We made them compete for first, second, and third place in the challenge. What they had to do is, of course, map the university with clean data, which meant that our team on the tech desk back at the Open Institute was monitoring all the data that was coming in, making sure that everything was being done correctly, number one. Number two, they had to also make a short video like you've just seen me do with the Ability program, whereby they just document their journey throughout their campus, them mapping their campus, what they feel, who they spoke to, what they educated other students about the Ability program on, and then submit that video to us, and then we put them on our platforms. You can find all the videos on our platforms, of course, but because they are the winners, these three from Kenyatta University, we would like to showcase their video right here on the Ability Show. They had a lot of fun, it looked like, and they got to educate and sensitize other students as well on their campus around ability and the importance of accessibility in all areas, especially campuses, because hey, you know what? We all want an education, not just you, people with abilities, but also people like myself with disabilities. So they called their team Team Phoenix, and here is Team Phoenix's video on their mapping challenge.
Hi guys, my name is Charles.
I'm Medrin.
My name is Devian Komboka, and this is Team Phoenix. We are filming for the University Mapping Challenge. It's hosted by Open Institute, their Ability project. So welcome, so that we see how accessible our university is for people with special abilities. So let's do this.
Try, you'll find there's no need to cry.
In case you hear someone doing a building or just making a street, also remind them to bear in mind that there are people who have special abilities and use certain tools to move around. Yeah, that's it.
Make a better place, heal the world.
The mapping challenge continues, and so far so good. You can see there's clear signage. This is directing you to the hostels. We are going to the business center of students. There's a restaurant, there are classes, there are conference rooms. Basically almost everything happens there, so let's go.
Make a better place for you and for me.
Mapping our university to see how accessible it is for people with special abilities.
So the mapping of KU has been a success from our point. We've done all the buildings, we've seen how much accessible they are. We are happy to report that most of the buildings in Kenyatta University in campus are actually accessible to everyone, including people with disabilities, even children. We were even privileged enough to get children who are touring the school who shared the same experience they had of how accessible they are. We even encourage them that even as they grow and as they aspire to become even developers or anything, policy makers, that they consider these people with disabilities. And we want to thank the Open Institute through the Ability project for bringing up this project, which is very essential. And we want to ask that everyone out there embraces this idea, accommodates everyone, including people with the disabilities. Thank you.
On the Ability program, we loved the job that they did at Kenyatta University. Team Phoenix did such an amazing job, and they were able to do so much, and their campus is particularly big. I've been there just recently and I was like, wow, this is like its own little town. And so we're really happy that they were the winners, and of course appreciate all the hard work that they put into making that video, and also of course winning the mapping challenge. As they are our guests on today's episode of the Ability Show, we of course had to ask them a little bit more about their experience, what they feel now that the University Mapping Challenge is over, and what they've been able to experience and think about and ruminate over since that time. Here's what they had to say.
My university, that is Kenyatta University, I got to learn it's very accessible for people with special abilities. There are different features that have been put there. The ramps, the lifts have braille where someone can just move on their own. The white doors. It was an interesting experience, and I got to appreciate the place where I study, because there are times we have been taught in psychology classes that we need to put different learners into mind when we are teaching, like having people who have visual impairment sit at the front, having people who have hearing impairment sit at the front, and make sure as a teacher you're loud enough. But until I got to do the mapping challenge and participate in the ability project, then I know for sure it is very important. It shows that it's a place that anyone, whatever their challenge is or whatever states they are in, then they can easily acquire an education.
There's a lecture hall called OML in our university. It has stairs and it has a ramp at the middle where somebody goes up to the second floor. I really used to wonder why the need for that ramp is, and it is comparatively longer distance than the stairs. So I used to wonder why will someone even want to take the ramp and not the stairs, until I came to ability, and then I began now to understand better. I think now I was able to now know why there is even braille. I didn't even know the braille in lifts. That was one big surprise to me. I used to wonder why they are this. Okay, I only used to know that there are numbers and that annoying noise of first floor, going up, going down, and stuff like that, But I now began to understand well, and I appreciated especially Kenyatta University for having in mind these things way before most of us even knew about them.
You know what? I really appreciate when people are open and honest about their thoughts. And seeing as though these three students, especially from Kenyatta University, have been able to openly share what they used to think and what they now think, it clearly shows that there is some progression and that the ability program is doing its job in a little way, at least. In between questions, Devian also shared with me an experience that she's been able to have in her personal life. She has an auntie who is also blind, and she had to help her and live with her for a period of 6 months. In these 6 months, Devian shared with me that she really, really started to understand that there is so much that is missing in our society in terms of just basic infrastructure, because her auntie couldn't go anywhere on her own. Devian had to always be with her to go into town, to go to the shops, to go to church, and so on and so forth. But on the bright side, nowadays, Devian has reported that her auntie has been able to get a job, and her job is particularly supportive of her, even with her condition of visual impairment. Have you ever heard of this saying of building mental ramps? Building mental ramps basically means that in society, and us as individuals have the onus or the responsibility to educate ourselves on all things that are outside of our own experience. To be honest with you, we are not all there, including myself, but definitely there is some progression. This University Mapping Challenge and the Ability Program in general, as well as Science TV, is definitely trying to do exactly that, to build more mental ramps within people, to grow our society, to make them understand that different isn't bad. Different is actually a beautiful thing. And we all try to fit in society and in life in general, but why fit in when we were built to stand out? Why fit in when we were built to stand out? With whatever your condition, whatever your situation, that is the end goal, I feel especially, is that we need to build mental ramps in that, you know what, just because someone is different in one way or the other doesn't mean that they are bad or wrong or need to be fixed in any single way. They just are different. And hey, diversity makes these ingredients much more exciting, much more versatile, and just much more interesting of an experience to have in life. Because if we were all the same, it would be pretty boring. And that's exactly what I feel that these three students and everyone else who's been volunteering with us on the Ability Program has been able to capture, at least in a very small way. Let's continue hearing from the students on more of their thoughts about how this particular program and project has affected them in their daily lives.
My mindset has changed since I worked on the Ability project, because before I simply thought, let everyone mind their own business, but I have realized as a person I need to take an initiative too to carry on this conversation, talking to stakeholders and telling them, just even reaching out to maybe people who are working in architectural firms and telling them, actually, we need certain features in buildings because of this and this. We need to carry forward the conversation. What are we willing to go ahead and do? It's not just saying sorry, it's what can we do about it. We are looking forward to getting solutions on how to make places accessible, how to help these people and not just sympathize.
Before I came here, nothing about disability came into my head, like when I pass across this place, can a person with a wheelchair pass that place? It didn't even occur to me until I came here and I was blindfolded for half a day. And that really changed my mindset. Nowadays, even when I pass in town, I just try to think, can a person with disability pass here? Can a person with who is blind pass here? Like, it just comes automatically into my head, unlike before.
These students, I am telling you, are so bright. They are so intelligent, and the things that they were telling me on and off camera was so inspiring to hear. It's really good to know that people are actually taking this thing seriously, and they're actually trying to put it in place in their own lives, in their own education, in their own workplaces, in their own homes, and so on. It's very encouraging to also know that these students are the same students who are also going to be taking on the idea of ability throughout their own careers as teachers, as architects, as journalists, so on and so forth, scientists, engineers. All of the students that helped us volunteer on the ability program are hopefully going to take this forward. And as well, one thing that we want to do on the ability program is advocate for these kinds of issues to be taught in schools, not just in universities, but in high schools, in even primary schools, because to be honest, as soon as you are able to get these ideas across to children at a very young age, they will stay with them and use them in everything that they do. In everything that they do. I feel as though this is one of the best and most sustainable solutions that we can choose to exercise, is that students should be taught about accessibility and the issues surrounding accessibility in all manners, in all shapes of life, because they are the ones who are going to be our future politicians. They'll be our future workforce. They'll be our future advocates. They'll be our future everything. They will just be our future. And the sooner that we can get them to understand and engage with matters to do with accessibility for people with disabilities, but for everyone as well in general, the better that this country is going to be. But you know what? Let's move on into the next segment of the show, Ask Ability. Welcome to the part of the show where you get to ask ability. Today we have a question from John, who works in a supermarket, and he says that he recently had a customer who was deaf who came into the supermarket, and he had to attend to him. He wasn't too sure what to do. He felt a little bit fumbly. He was unsure, unconfident what to say, how to say it, how to communicate well with the customer who was deaf. So he asks, what are the best practices? Thank you for your question, John. Let's talk about it.
This is how we do it.
So John, this is actually a really difficult one. I feel many people have struggles with trying to communicate well with a deaf person. The tips that I would say are really useful for me in general, and also other people who I have interacted with, are, number one, if you can, please try as best as possible to speak to a deaf person right in front of them. Right parallel so that they can see your face clearly. Don't speak to them on the side or behind them, etc. Try and do it so that they can see and read your lips, because some deaf people are able to lip read. Number two, I would also say that you should use facial expressions to accompany what you're trying to communicate. So if you're happy, smile. If you're frustrated, do the same. Have your expressions match what you're trying to communicate so that they can also try and follow what you're saying, because obviously if you can't sign language and they can't hear you, then at least facial expressions will help the conversation be a little bit more rich. Number three, try and have a notebook and pen in handy when you think you're going to be talking to a deaf person in any kind of circumstance. The reason for this is that if you can't sign language that they can't hear, then at least you can write things down to communicate that way, which makes things so much easier. General tips as well I'd give you is try and get some sign language lessons in. If you can, just a few words, a few phrases, so that you can also show the deaf person that, you know what, I'm trying to communicate with you as best as I can, and people really appreciate when you put in the effort. I hope that helps. Remember, the golden rule has always been treat people the way you want to be treated. But here at Ability, we use the platinum rule, which is treat people the way they want to be treated and not the way you think that they should be treated. If you have any more questions that you'd like to ask us, please email us on ability@openinstitute.com, or you can follow us on all our social media platforms, and our handle is just Open Institute.
This guy was interviewing a friend about the university, how accessible it is, and I was surprised that that person actually said that that particular university was not accessible at all. And then I thought that there's this person maybe somewhere who maybe wasn't born with a disability, but somewhere along after he joined that university, maybe in first year he had an accident or something, and then he's now disabled, and now he can't access the lecture halls and he can't access anything else, and it's so sad. It's really sad, and I don't know. I wish that more people could be exposed to this kind of knowledge, so that everyone, even at home, even the simple homes that we live in, you can, when you're building that particular house, even if it is that small, we can really consider everyone, especially people with these disabilities, because these are things that can happen to anyone at any time.
We have come to the end of the show. Can you imagine? Oh my goodness, but I hope that you've been able to enjoy and also been able to be educated on one or two things about the mindset in our country to do with ability and disability. Episode 1 and 2 are now over, but I hope that you'll join us again for episode 3. We'll be talking about even more interesting things, and we'll be having more guests on our show to help you and I understand this thing better, so we can tackle it together, because you know what, like I said before, Rome wasn't built in a day, and it for sure was not built by just one person. So, hope you have an amazing week, and see you on the next episode of The Ability Show. My name is Crystal Asige. Bye-bye. And cut!